Right, evening all. Let's have a live chat about the interaction between Brexit or Brexit plans and the coronavirus crisis. And there are three lines by which the coronavirus crisis really impacts heavily on this government Brexit plans. And it's more complicated than just the domestic. The domestic is one part of it, but then there's also the US relationship, and then there's also the EU relationship. So today is the day that the deadline has passed for us being able to get an easy extension on the Brexit transition period, something which this government wasn't going to go for anyway. But given the change, they could and should have taken it, but they passed up that opportunity. And I'll come back to that later on. But let's talk about the three main routes by which coronavirus has really changed Brexit plans. So firstly, on the domestic line, there is, of course, the economic hit because coronavirus is, because of all the lockdown, it costs a whole lot of money, sucks away resources like that. That one you know. Time-wise, you also know it sucks away all of your resources because we haven't had time bandwidth in order to be able to handle all of them. But the government don't seem too bothered about that. Perhaps more importantly, because this government have messed things up, it has been very disruptive of credibility of this government, this government's political capital, especially as it faces the nation and says, we can handle complex situations. So that has also gone. So that's a triple hit on the domestic front that this government were not planning on at the beginning of the year. And then finally, there is actually the issue of, as we look to the end of the year, you could have a second wave or you could have flare-ups. It's particularly tricky in the winter months when you've got the interaction between coronavirus and influenza, but also the backlog of hospital operations and diagnostics, think cancer, all that backlog going into the winter. And then if you have a crash out Brexit at the end of it, which hurts your supply chains and causes other disruption, then that means that there's tons going on the domestic front, which is going to make Brexit a lot more complicated. Now, let's talk about the international interactions with Brexit plans. Firstly, from the side of the States. Remember, at the beginning of this year, the thinking was it looked likely that Donald Trump was going to get his second term. He was riding high, and we were going to do a trade deal with Donald Trump. That was one of the core purposes of doing Brexit. Well, remember what I told you just before about political capital? America has also been hit hard by Donald Trump's sheer mismanagement of coronavirus. His rating in the eyes of the world, even though it wasn't particularly high before, has really nosedived across Europe and across the UK. The thought of doing a trade deal with Donald Trump, who has so badly mismanaged his country at the moment, has made that a lot less attractive. So this government, it's not just the chlorinated chicken and hormone-injected beef and ISDS and threat to the NHS, which still exists incidentally on the data front and the patient privacy front and control policy front. It's not just all of those, it's also the very notion of doing a trade deal with Donald Trump and having that political bind is very toxic to a lot of people, particularly women, incidentally. So that doesn't look like such a big win for this government anymore, and they're starting to realize it and go quiet on that front. So that was a big play that they were planning on. And then there's the European dimension. And so at the beginning of the year, remember the plan was essentially overall with an 80-seat majority. You've got your local elections coming up in May in a lot of northern seats, again going in hard with promises of big money and big spending, reaffirming the Brexit mission was going to help assert that the country wanted to get Brexit done, spend big, and then Europe was looking, they'd sort of come together as a unified front, sort of against the UK, but where was their leadership? There wasn't that much of it, because Merkel was looking towards the end, looking at being at the end of her days and looking weaker. Well, Merkel has had a new lease of life, a new surge in the polls. Germany has handled the coronavirus crisis particularly well, which has meant that she has got that surge of political capital, which she didn't have before. And as Germany right now, takes over the presidency of the EU, she's got a flush of more support right at a time when Germany actually needs to start saying, we will make that investment in the wider EU structure for the sake of recovery. And that's the kind of thing where she is naturally inclined to go. And she now has the political capital to help push that financial capital. And Emmanuel Macron is also in the same camp with regard to, we need to have that funding across the EU. And because she's in such a strong place personally and taking up the EU presidency, and there's a clear plan on that, then essentially the whole narrative that the Brexiteers were saying of, now that we've got coronavirus crisis, people aren't going to notice when we crash out, that's wrong. That's interactive for us, and that's very damaging. But for the rest of Europe, they're not going to notice our Brexit. So that means that's why she's feeling in a much, much stronger place. So the UK has had lots of things happen this year that have really changed a whole load of dynamics. And I don't think that that our government has responded to it fully. They haven't realized that they're a lot more drained of capacity than they were at the beginning of the year. They're not a cohesive unit. The big FDR style big splash and spend, that's only 5 billion. That's only 75 quid per person. That is hardly a big and brave new deal for the country. So they're low on political capital. They're low on actual financial capital. They don't have an advantage of rolling into Donald Trump, because that is toxic to the UK population. And then the EU is actually looking sort of relatively strong at the moment. So the smartest thing that they could do would actually be to try and work cross-party now on unifying narratives around how the nation is working together in order to build back during the second half of the year. They're starting to roll out those narratives, quietly bury the US trade deal and not bank on it, and then actually genuinely look to preserve as much of the European relationship as they can. And here's why: because a lot of people that voted for Brexit, they don't actually want the full crash out with all those consequences. They wanted to come out of the political construct in theory and think we are out now and kind of expect things to stay the same. So if after all of this traumatic year, we can't keep things the same with Europe, and that takes another step down, well, then that's going to put the UK in a very difficult place when the mood of the world is not free trading and so forth and so on. So these sort of 3 lines of damage to the Brexiteer sort of plans is exactly the 3 lines that we, those of us that care about the UK relationship with Europe and feel British European and want to maintain those British European standards and collaboration and sort of culture and all of that. These are the 3 lines of pressure we need to put on. We need to point out that this government can't handle complex situations in as much as it says it can. That these guys are salesmen about ideas, but they're not actually effective doers when it comes to competent management. Point that out repeatedly. Then the second one is, we've got to go hell for leather against this US campaign. Completely undermines what the Brits want, what our population wants. We want our high standards. We want public control over trade deals. We want to protect our NHS, and we want to protect our decision making around it and our democratic capacities as they are, and not have them undermined by ISDS, by big tech companies or big US agriculture for no gain. So we've got to go hard on that. And then we've got to identify quite clearly all of the building blocks with Europe that we value the most, and that the wider population are going to value. So they're clearly, the science ones, the educational exchanges, all of the health frameworks. These are going to be the main things that we go on. But I just thought that I'd get on and chat to you about, given that it is today the deadline for extension, and this government has decided not to react, not to adapt, to stick to its original plans. And given that there have been analyses showing the economic interactions between Brexit and the coronavirus crisis, and it is actually not just additive, but also interactive detrimentally, and particularly in those red wall seats and abandoned areas. But it goes beyond all of that domestic stuff. It really does link in the changing view of the US and the changing views and capacities within the EU. Those two things also come into play, and the sands really have shifted on this government. And I think that it's just going to make for a very interesting second half of the year, and I don't think it plays to the government's favour if they want to stick stubborn-mindedly to their original Brexit plans. And I will sure as hell be fighting against those original plans and for a much more sensible relationship, rebuilding with Europe and rebuilding with our neighbourhood, because that's what I think ultimately the British public really want. Anyway, there we go. I am done. Okay, let's have a look at some of these comments. And now applications for residency cards for Brits in France are being put back another 3 months. Yep, we are all European, want to keep our passports. Yep, I mean, one thing that I didn't say again is all the polling showing that still a majority of this country by polling shows that we would rather be in the EU rather than outside. And if you look at whether people would rather have us abide by US standards or EU standards, it's absolutely overwhelming that EU standards is where we want UK standards. They are very much aligned in terms of the spirit of it all. You are so positive. Yeah, well, you don't survive this long in campaigning for this kind of stuff without being positive. I mean, I know lots of people get upset and depressed and all the rest, but essentially you can only do what you can do. You pour out your heart, you say what you believe in, and you can do no more. There's no point getting stressed about anything. Just work harder, then know you've done your best and feel satisfied in that. What else have we got? You guys voted Liberal because you didn't want communism, and now you're complaining still. This is what you get if you vote Liberal, is how the first... Right. Not a lot of people in this country want communism, and I don't quite get that comment. I think there are far too many people who I see arguing in extremes, and that looks like one of those. EU standards are global standards. They are used by most of the world. Brexit is all lies and always has been. Yeah, it's an important point about EU standards, actually. The common, the CE standard, and then the standards of our chemicals and so forth and so on. Because the EU is such a large market that, and has been, and has its standards basically agreed across 27 or 28 different nations, then that's a very easy guide for the rest of the world that aren't part of big markets to pick up on. So there's lots of European standards that have been adapted sort of like by default right around the world, going off to, I believe, our chemical standards in sort of Australia. What else have we got? A beautiful planet ruined by the human virus. Yeah, well, I mean, what can I say? I have a hope that that humans will actually improve and learn to become better stewards of this planet. Not the masters of this planet, but stewards and caretakers of all the species upon it. And I think, you know, in the long run, if we can protect this planet from stray meteors by being able to shoot it out of the space around us, then on levels like that, we'll actually be able to protect this planet. But I think we've got a long way to go to actually sort of unpick our own damage and start salvaging things that we've started to ruin. But, you know, I think that there is something in the human spirit which is loving and creative and nurturing, and so I think we can get there. It's just incredibly painful to watch the stupidity along the path. Thank you, Mike. Your energy is what keeps me going. How do you sustain optimism? No, just like I said before, I mean, life is long and history is even longer. And if you think about the movements of different ideas, you know, they take many years or decades to come to fruition and then sort of really bed in. And I think if you get yourself stressed, it's usually because, you know, you recognize your own sort of lack of power to make the world around you exactly as you would like. But as soon as you're acknowledging that you're doing as much as you reasonably can do, then I think that makes things a lot easier. And for me, I don't know, I mean, everyone finds what it is that relaxes them. For me, I'm actually doing videos like this and just getting it out there and saying what I think and expressing all of it stops it bubbling away inside and making me tense, and actually sort of helps me get it out there. Also, keeping myself in check and not getting too angry on social media, and rather trying to find sort of like more humorous lines on it, or finding agreement with people that I usually disagree with. For some reason, that just sort of works for me to sort of like regather those connections with people that I didn't think I'd agree with about anything, but you feel better for it. You feel better for it. So it's like there's this demonstration by some farmers coming up in Westminster in a week's time. It's a slow drive of farmers, and I've posted about that, and I've seen so many people sort of Remainers saying, "Oh, farmers, they deserve what they get. They're Brexit voters." Da 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 da. And it's like, why are you winding yourself up about that? If you've got a lot of farmers that are getting anxious about Brexit and starting to see it differently and come onto your side politically, people are coming onto your side politically, sharing concerns that you were warning about before, and you're getting angry about that. But that's what you want. So what are you doing? So I think people holding on to you know, stress and anger about other people, I think is very unproductive. And actually seeing new opportunities where you can sort of link and with people that you know you didn't before, I think that's important as well. So, you know, I think that'll do. I mean, okay, I'm gonna stop now. I think that is enough, and I'm gonna go and chill out for tonight. I've done enough work for today. I'm knackered, so I'm just gonna relax now. And I'm gonna read my book about Zen and archery. So good night, folks, and end broadcast.